Hello to everyone who is joining us. Give us a few moments to let everyone get into the webinar and we will get started. Hi to everyone who's joining. We'll just take one more minute to let a few more people join the webinar and then we will get started. All right, let's get started. Thank you everyone so much for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on which time zone you are joining us from. Welcome to all our many guests from around the world. I'm Shelley West from the Advisory Board for the Arts. I'm going to be moderating this webinar today. I'm really excited about our topic, loyalty and revenue in the YouTube universe. We have three amazing panelists who are going to share their insights about how arts organizations can build, engage, and even monetize audiences with online videos. But before we dive into the content, let's take a quick look at the incredible community of arts organizations that has come together today. So you see here a list of just some of the organizations who are joining today's session. And the fact that this font is quite tiny, I think is a testament to just how timely and relevant this topic really is. We have a broad spectrum of arts and culture organizations, from art museums and theaters to operas and some schools. So welcome to everyone. Thank you so much. And in fact, bringing together arts organizations is core to the mission of the Advisory Board for the Arts. We do exist to serve our members and the broader arts community by forging long-term partnerships, conducting breakthrough research, and offering customized support in the form of tools and workshops and help with strategies. Please visit our website, advisoryarts.com, to access our Arts Resilience Center. It contains a lot of resources that you and your teams can use today as you continue to navigate this current crisis. And if you are interested in learning more about the exclusive services that Advisory Board for the Arts offers to our members, please email our CEO and founder, Chris Denby. You can see his picture up there and his email address down there at the bottom. But let's talk about how you can participate in today's webinar, because that is going to be an important part. So we're going to take advantage of this incredible gathering of arts organizations. You were all on mute with your videos off, so totally fine if you're still wearing your pajamas. But we really do want your questions and your input. So the first way to participate will be the Q&A function. It should be at the bottom middle of your screen. You may have to hover over it if you're in full screen mode. You'll use that to submit your questions. My colleague Karen Freeman and I will be monitoring those questions, and we will pass along as many as we can to our webinar panelists throughout our hour together today. You can also use the chat if you want to share ideas, if you want to alert us to issues, if you maybe have a question that you want your fellow attendees to answer, or see what other ideas they may have about something. Again, you can use the chat. Do make sure it is set to all participants and panelists if it is something that you want everyone to see. Let's actually, let's get our fingers and our minds warmed up here a little bit. So in the chat, you please go ahead and type in your favorite YouTube channel, creator, or video. If you can't think of a favorite, I know that's a large burden. It's early in the morning for a lot of you. If you can't think of a favorite, just type something that you have seen recently that you really liked. I will share that one of my favorite YouTube offerings is the NFL Mic'd Up, where they show all of the crazy things that football players say in the midst of football games. I typically watch that after my favorite games every week. See some great things here. We will not be using the raised hand function just because there's so many of you on there. So if you do want to contact us, again, questions through the Q&A, chat to your fellow attendees through that chat there. See some great things coming in here. Keep those coming. We are going to be recording this webinar, so you will have access to a replay as well as to a synthesis on our website, advisoryarts.com, later this week. There really are no slides to speak of, so we won't be posting any slides. But again, if there's someone else in your organization who you want to see this webinar, you want to replay it for yourself, it will be posted on our website later this week. Some great YouTube channels and ideas coming in here right now. So let's get to our agenda for the day. Why are we here? Well, according to YouTube itself, people watch over 1 billion hours of video per day on the platform. That is 114,000 years of video each day. And that's actually pre-pandemic statistics. So I don't know about you, but I certainly have been watching quite a bit more as I have been isolating at home. But as we all know, not all content is created equal. Everybody can upload a video. I think the plethora of cats riding Roombas videos speaks to that, but not everybody can monetize content, can build an engaged, active, or loyal audience. And so to that end, we are going to focus our discussion on 3 major topic areas that are core to success. You see them across the page here: building an audience, creating quality content, and making content pay. So I'm going to guide our panelists through a discussion highlighting each of these, and then we'll pepper in your questions along the way. So please do use the Q&A function to submit your questions that you'd like us to ask to the panelists. We will answer as many as we can. So with that, let's meet our panelists. I am so pleased to welcome our 3 exceptional speakers today who are going to share their insights and their experiences from inside and from outside the arts world. So we have Sam Denby. Sam is the founder of Wendover Productions, a YouTube channel featuring videos about how the world works. A lot of them are about aviation, as you see in his lovely photo there, with over 2.6 million subscribers. Emily Graslie. Emily has, I think, the coolest title I have actually ever heard. She is the Chief Curiosity Correspondent for the Field Museum in Chicago. She runs their YouTube channel, The Brain Scoop, which has over 560,000 subscribers. And Dave Wiskus, who, in addition to being a content creator himself, Dave is the founder and CEO of Standard, which is a community of and an agency for digital creators. They recently launched Nebula, which is a subscription-based streaming platform. We'll hear a little bit more about that later. So let's hear a little bit more about our panelists from them. So Sam, if you could kick us off here, tell us a little more about you, Wendover Productions, and how it all got started.
Hi. So once again, I'm Sam. About 4 years ago, when I was just 18 years old, I started making YouTube videos, first on Wendover Productions, channel you see up here. And through time, this has kind of grown and grown into more of a business. So we expanded to a second channel called Half It's Interesting. And we've done podcasts. More recently, we've been making documentaries. And along with Dave, who the founder and CEO of Standard, who's also here, I was a co-founder of Nebula, that streaming site that you just heard about.
Awesome. Emily, how about you? Tell us about you. Tell us about the Brain Scoop, how it all got started.
Hello, it's good to be here. So I started the Brain Scoop as a recent graduate of the University of Montana, where I was volunteering in a small natural history collection that was on our campus, and just started making YouTube videos with the help of Hank Green, who has established a number of educational programs and channels on YouTube. And so he helped me launch the Brain Scoop in late 2012, early 2013, and a couple of months later, after making less than a dozen videos about natural history museums, the Field Museum in Chicago reached out to me about acquiring our program, and they brought me on as their first ever Chief Curiosity Correspondent. And in the last 7 years or so, we've made over 200 educational videos about the research and collections of natural history museums. And this has also led me to be the executive producer, host, and writer of a national 3-part PBS series that just broadcast, wrapped up last week, called Prehistoric Road Trip. So it's another additional extension sort of our museum digital broadcast and media outreach for the field.
Yeah, and Emily, tell us a little more about, the Field Museum, it certainly has other digital content. How does the Brain Scoop kind of tie in with the other things that the Field Museum does on social, on digital, not on social, not on digital?
That's a great question, and it really depends on what the video is. Here on the screen, you'll see the Chicago's Original Black Taxidermist video about Carl Cotton. This is a great example of a cross-departmental collaboration where Carl Cotton was this historic figure from the Field Museum. I've wanted to know more about this man ever since I saw this beautiful photo of him in the archives. It's pretty unusual to see a Black man working in exhibitions in the Natural History Museum in the 1950s and 60s. And so the Field Museum developed an exhibition about Carl Cotton, and this video was complimentary with that exhibition opening. So that's just one instance. And then the other two videos, like Backyard Birding and Stay Home, I mean, we had to completely revise our production schedule after COVID closure, but thanks to a GoPro and a gimbal, we can still make content that talks about exploring the natural world from wherever you are. And so we're pretty nimble and adaptable in that way.
Great. And certainly not least, but last in this instance, Dave, can you introduce yourself and what you do?
Hi, yeah, my name is Dave. I'm founder, CEO of Standard, a sort of community collection of education-ish creators. By education-ish, I mean, we have people who do hard science stuff, and there's also things like, how airplanes work. We have an entire channel dedicated to explaining every episode of Game of Thrones. So, your definition of education may vary. This came out of, I'm a creator myself. I make videos, I'm a musician, I'm a writer, and a podcaster. As I went through trying to make a living at any of these things, I realized the tools were terrible. And along the way, as I tried to build things for myself to build a sustainable business, I realized that I had collected enough pieces and enough relationships that there could be something useful here for other creators. So Standard and now Nebula are all about trying to sort of distribute that knowledge as much as possible.
Great. So as you can see, a lot of expertise here, both from inside the arts and outside the arts, which is one of the things, as you know, Advisory Board for the Arts tries to bring arts organizations is lessons, not only from your peers inside the arts, but also some lessons learned outside as well. So let's get into our discussion, building an audience. And Sam, I want to start with you. We had a discussion last week where we talked about sort of what is YouTube good for, and how might it differ when you're thinking about audiences? How might it differ from some of the other social channels? So I thought maybe you could kick us off by sharing that.
Yeah, so kind of what fundamentally makes YouTube different, and what essentially, the digital online video space is still pretty close to a monopoly. There's been a little more, some new entrants recently that have had more success than in the past. But what makes YouTube different than the other big social media sites, when you think like Twitter or Facebook, is that it is its real strength is around its ability to generate an audience. It is a audience expansion tool potentially, whereas Twitter and Facebook are more audience engagement, because there's not really, with the manner of content that is put on Twitter and Facebook, and with the way that content is presented on those platforms, you really don't expand your audience much there. Whereas YouTube, the majority of views on YouTube do not come from your existing subscribed audience, because viewers can subscribe to an individual channel in order to see all their videos in a feed. But the majority of views on most every channel comes from discovery mechanisms through their homepage, browse pages, recommended videos, and all that. So that means that there's really nowhere where it's easier to reach a new audience if you're making good stuff than YouTube, and that's why you get stories of most people who are now creating videos as a full-time job on YouTube did not start out working for a production company or a big organization or anything. They started making out videos for fun, in their bedroom or whatever, and that turned into a business with millions of viewers and everything.
Great. So let's talk about audience, because audience is pretty important. We have a lot of arts organizations obviously on the line here. And when you think about who is your audience, and Emily, I'll start with you. Who are you targeting with your content? Do you have a particular, type of person or type of audience in mind? How do you think about that? And Emily, you are on mute.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that was a big question when I was brought onto the Field Museum too. Initially, the question was, what are we going to do with this property, right? When I came to the Field Museum, I think Brains Group had about 150,000 subscribers. And, at first, I was kind of dropped in the marketing department. And one of the first priorities was seeing if we could somehow link viewership to the channel and translate that into foot traffic or on-site attendance. And in many ways, that can be possible depending on your strategy, or for instance, if you're going to have a video about an exhibition opening, certainly there are like pretty organic tie-ins there. But it became fairly apparent when we looked at the audience demographics of who was watching our channel, that we couldn't just have a focus on the people who were physically able to enter the building in terms of like audience cultivation. And that's because half of our audience lives outside the United States. And so we recognized then at that point, it's a really exciting opportunity for growth, for audience engagement, for the Field Museum in general, because for the last 100 years, they'd only been relying on people who could physically enter the building. And so that's where a lot of the marketing and promotional audience building was targeted to, which was the Chicago tourism and the surrounding 4-state region. But with Brain Scoop, it really opens you up to talk about, or to consider, what are some of the bigger issues that we can address as an organization? How can we create content that supports the mission of the Field Museum, which is that we are a cultural and a scientific organization with researchers who work on every continent and work on meteorites from outer space and the depths of the ocean. So we're really a global organization anyway. And I think the Brain Scoop was an exciting opportunity for the museum to begin exploring some new ways that we could engage with our international viewers.
Got it. And Dave, you have the opportunity to work with a lot of different content creators. And so when you look at sort of how they target their audiences, I mean, is the goal here just anybody make content for anybody, or is the goal, find your niche and serve them well? What is your perspective on sort of what the best content creators do?
Usually it's niche. I mean, you find a large enough niche and you've got a winner, but it's a balance point. There's channels, when I think of, I'd mentioned the channel that does nothing but explain every episode of Game of Thrones. As Game of Thrones ended, the channel's called Alt-Shift-X. As Game of Thrones ended, view counts went down when he started exploring other shows. Like he did the first 2 seasons of Westworld, not as popular. But the audience builds back up, and it has more to do with the popularity of the show than it does with the popularity of the channel. But by doing something that was hyper-focused and something that was genuinely of interest to him, it allowed him to tap into a community need while having enough content that he could keep making videos. And something like Game of Thrones, it's big enough, it's popular enough to be self-sustaining until the show runs out. And you look at things like even Sam with Wendover, when the plane videos, Sam can comment more on this, but when the plane videos started, there's no way to not say taking off. When they started taking off, the focus shifted a little bit, like, okay, let's do more of that. Most of the channels that we see are either broad within a niche or hyper focused within a niche, but niche is kind of the win all around. Whenever we see creators trying to just like throw stuff at the wall and see what works, like this week I'm gonna make a video about this subject, and the next video is going to be about something completely different genre, different audience. If you want the channel to grow, it's more important that you find the audience and keep tailoring your content to that audience, and their behavior through the YouTube algorithm you will be rewarded in the form of more people like that finding your stuff. When you go scattershot, it doesn't usually work out.
Yeah. And Sam, you, as you said, you sort of built your channel from nothing. Now you have 2 quite large channels. How did you go about building them? Do you think about different audiences for Wendover versus Half as Interesting? Or, how did you kind of achieve that growth over time from just a couple videos to, as you said, sort of a business?
Right. So yeah, the how growth tends to go on YouTube specifically is you kind of have this first period where you're making videos, and assuming they're good and would engage an audience, you're kind of waiting for a bit of luck for that video to be surfaced by the discovery mechanisms on YouTube, so the algorithm. And then it sort of turns into quite natural growth, where one video will expand your audience a bit, and the next video will expand your audience a little bit more. And it kind of snowballs on top of each other. In order to shortcut that first phase a bit, I did a little bit of purposeful promotion on other social media sites with some success, and kind of being like my own PR person, sending it to blogs along with like a pitch and stuff. But it was mostly organic growth. So that means that the nice thing about these platforms is that you don't have to put all your effort or an enormous amount of effort into marketing the channels, because the sites that you put video content on have their own audience expansion tools. So it's more about making content that will engage audiences, which is a much more interesting part of the job. And at least for me, it's a little more meritocratic, in my opinion, which makes it a little more interesting.
Got it. And let's talk about the sort of content itself, because a lot of arts organizations are dealing with, heavily reduced staffs right now. This is not an area where they potentially have a huge amount of budget, but Emily, I'll start with you. How do you think about, you mentioned in the chat, I'm not sure if everyone saw it, that the Brain Scoop team is you and one editor and producer. This is not some massive team. But when you think about the different, we think about the term sort of quality. what is most important to you? Because there's music, there's video, there's captions, there's scripting, there's research. Like, what do you prioritize? What is most important to make content good?
Well, all of those things need to be good. Part of the video. So I work with, I mentioned in the chat, I work with one other editor producer, but I mean, we both have to be a jack of all trades. I handle all of the pre-production, research planning, ideation, strategic plan, budgeting, marketing, interfacing across departments, to some extent, fundraising or capitalizing on sponsorship opportunities. And in addition to that, working with our producer who handles all of the filming, editing, post-production, sound design, music, that kind of thing. And so we do what's manageable. Like we do what we can, knowing how long it takes to make a video. I think that's one of the most important things that we've learned from experience is when we're approached by another department or a researcher or even another museum that comes to us and says, we would like to collaborate with you to make a video about X topic. From there, it just is a collaboration to try and identify what resources are going to be needed to make that vision happen. And so that means that we have a really dynamic production schedule. Some videos we turn around in a week. Some videos we work on for 6 months. Occasionally we'll work on a video and it's ready to publish and the timing isn't right. For instance, we spent 6 months working on a video talking about the efforts that the Natural History Museum in Brazil is undertaking. They had a horrible fire that destroyed their entire museum in 2018. And we started working mid-year last year once I got a Brazilian volunteer on board to help us with some of the language barriers and some of the connections we needed at the Brazil Museum. So we spent 6 months developing a video about the recovery efforts, and then COVID happened. And from an audience building and engagement standpoint, it just didn't seem like an appropriate time to remind people of another global tragedy. And so we decided to hold off on posting that video, and we'll post it on September 2nd this year, which is 2 years after the fire. So occasionally, creating quality content is also looking across the landscape and seeing, is this content going to resonate right now? What would resonate? And we try to work, and again, I mentioned earlier, we're pretty nimble, but we use that sort of as our guiding light to help us identify topics that are timely and that are reflective of a bigger organizational mission as a whole. But yeah, certainly like the nuts and bolts of like making sure the production quality is high is sort of video making 101. And that doesn't have to be a huge cost investment. It just means knowing what it takes to capture good audio. Or knowing that, sit in front of a window with a single light source, like can help with lighting. You don't have to have a bunch of equipment. So.
Got it. And Sam, how about you? How do you think about and prioritize quality? I know some of your videos have original video content that you shoot. Some of them have content that it looks like you pull down from open sources on the web, or perhaps that you buy the rights to. What is most important to you when you think about quality, the research, the script, the video? How do you prioritize?
Yeah, so it's definitely something to think about a lot. Kind of somewhat counterintuitive. Well, piggybacking a bit on what Emily has talked about, what we found are the factors that really make or break how successful a video is and how much the audience enjoys it. It's not necessarily how polished the video is, or how artful the video we use, the source video we use is. Those really can help, but it's really about the underlying topic, how that topic is presented, and how the audience is engaged in the video. So that's things like making sure what you're talking about fundamentally, and that's of course in this format where we're kind of doing explainatory videos about educational topics. but it's making sure that the underlying concept of the video is engaging and sets the rest up for success, because that's like everything builds on the underlying idea of the video. And then on top of that, you know, there's the factor of how well do you write your script? Is it presenting the ideas in a logical way, in a way that allows the audience to follow it and understand it? And then there's, you know, the more aesthetic elements of, or the more production elements of, like, of course the video is going to do better if you have good audio and good lighting if you're on camera, and nice 4K footage and all that. But that's really the top level. Each of these levels relies kind of on the level below it, and a video cannot succeed really without a really good topic or subject or concept at the bottom. But then it can do better if it has a better script, and then it can do better if it has good production value and all that. So it's really about making sure that the lower levels are very good, are the best, and then the upper levels are at least at the sort of right balance of cost and quality.
And Dave, I know you, again, you work with so many creators, and there's sort of this, there's like an in-house option, there's you can hire a firm like Standard, but what do you see when you look at, you know, what is your advice on what should people keep in-house versus what should they outsource, or how do they even think through that if there's not one answer to that question?
I think it's a question of what are you good at? If you have people who are either experts in lighting and production and audio, or are curious and passionate about learning those things, then you go in-house. If those aren't core competencies and those aren't interests, then farm it out and have somebody else take care of it. It really comes down to, like, if you want to develop, if you want to build that muscle, spend the time, spend the energy building that muscle. But if you don't, then just don't. Because if you don't, you're never going to be great at it. You're never going to make something that looks spectacular or sounds spectacular. And you may not also care about that.
Yeah. So a number of folks have asked questions about music and about video length. So let's start with video length. Emily and Sam, what are your thoughts on, do you have a certain length? Do you have it, so I never go over, 14 minutes, or I'm always go over 4.5 minutes? Like, how do you think about length?
I'll jump in here. I like to give the obnoxious answer that your English teacher in high school gave you, which is that it's as long as it needs to be. But that said, we've experimented a lot with video length on YouTube, especially because what the algorithm favors in terms of discoverability has changed a lot in the time that I've been making videos. So it used to be that frequency of upload was king. So if you were a channel that was uploading a video every Tuesday and Thursday, your discoverability was inherently going to be higher. And at some point in the last 4 years, that changed to seem to favor video length. And so we've tried to kind of experiment with that. And we've done everything from, we did a series of videos called 60-second specimens. And they are exactly what it sounds like. These are 60-second long, just like really quick narrative stories about one specimen in the museum's collection. And they did, as we predicted, much better on other social platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, which are not really discoverability platforms for content. They are audience engagement, but the video length tended to perform better there, because what happened was when people were watching it on our YouTube channel, it dropped the overall audience view duration percentage, and that YouTube signaled that as like people aren't as engaged with the content, despite the fact that people were watching like 85% of the 60-second video. It just wasn't great for audience growth for us. And on the other side, we've seen videos that are much, much longer still perform well. For instance, we did a 20-minute long video about a very dense topic about the history of museums and anthropologists removing or acquiring remains of humans from past archaeological digs. And the question is, should we repatriate these human remains? The video is called What Should Museums Do with Their Dead? It's a long video, and it's just a two-person conversation with myself and another YouTube creator, Caitlin Doty, who's a mortician. She has a fantastic channel called Ask a Mortician, and I highly recommend checking that out because I think her channel really speaks to what Sam was saying about this tiered approach of content is king and then you build on it. But her production value is very simple. It's just her and a camera in her house, and it's really her character and her synthesis of these topics that make the conversations really engaging. So we did really well with that 20-minute long video. It was our most viewed video of the last year, has I think 150,000 views or something. In addition to that, we've also done super long videos where one time we did a 4-hour-long live stream dissection of an alligator. And that was great. You know, the people watched the entire 4 hours, and it was something that they probably weren't engaged in every single minute, but something that you could have on a background screen while you're eating lunch, I guess, or at work. But those videos, we condense them after they're posted and condense them to about 25-minute long time-lapse dissection videos, and we still get a lot of engagement on those. So it really comes back to does the length of the video match the topic of the video and the subject matter, and is the video too long, longer than it needs to be, or not long enough? And that's something you just kind of figure out as you go along.
Yeah. Dave, what do you think?
Says YouTube's.
Oh, go ahead.
Go for it. YouTube's official line here is that the most valuable statistic to the algorithm is platform watch time. So the length of the video isn't the part that matters. It's how long, when somebody shows up to watch your video, how long do they then stay on YouTube? And this is why you'll see, like in Emily's case, the 1-minute videos, somebody may come in, watch the entire video, and that's all they wanted, so they leave, like they would on Facebook or some other platform. If there's something about the handoff from that video to go watch this other video on the channel that is longer, or go check out even a video on another creator's channel, as long as they're staying on YouTube, the algorithm will inherently reward that, which is why I think, Emily, you're saying the balance point there being that if the video is appropriately sized for the content, if people stay engaged, even if they then, you know, at the 20-minute mark of a 30-minute video, wander off to do something else, as long as they're staying on the platform, then YouTube says this is great and they'll keep showing it to other people.
Yeah, like the 60-second videos weren't great on their own, but once we had 10 of them, right, and then you've created a 10-minute long playlist, that's when it really starts to pay off. Exactly. That makes perfect sense. That's according to what YouTube says. I don't think they even know the full depth of how the algorithm works, but they tell us that it does that.
And I think one generic piece of advice, just to think about what is that right length for the content, is that the platform tends to favor a certain amount of density of content, where, you know, so in the context of like the arts, you're probably not going to have high discoverability with like a 2-hour recording of an opera or something, or a concert. Like you might have some, but you would have more if you have like a dense, you know, 10-minute video, for example, that's maybe like an analysis of why this particular arietta or whatever is the most I don't know, the best piece of opera ever or something, because that's sort of densifying the information down and densifying the experience with the content down, and because the audience is bombarded with, you know, so many choices and switching between videos and you know, every few minutes, they tend to tolerate and enjoy content where it's less of a time commitment relative to the density of information.
Got it. And we've gotten a lot of questions just about the gear, if you will, the cameras, the mics, the audio. Emily and Sam, you guys addressed that with respect to like where it falls in terms of importance related to other things and how you have to build upon good content. But just, you know, sort of voyeuristically, what gear do people use? What should you use? Is there an answer to that? How do people go about this, especially given that a lot of them have limited budgets?
Yeah, I think the gear question, it's like above like a certain level where the audio is not terrible and the video is in focus and HD and everything. There's very fast diminishing returns on gear quality. Personally, I use an RE20 mic, which is about a $400 or $500 microphone. It's a normal broadcast microphone, but you could get 99% of the audience probably. Dave will probably disagree with me on this a bit. He likes his fancy stuff, but I think 90% of the audience would not notice the difference between a $100 microphone and a $500 microphone, at least very
No, I completely agree. You're totally right.
Okay, good. Well, and then
you weren't expecting that, were you?
And then when I'm filming on location, use a C200 camera, which again is way more than you need. Most everything you can get done with like a basic Sony A7 or something, which is a very popular mirrorless camera for content creators.
Yeah, the gear question, it kind of comes down to what do you want to get out of it. When you say diminishing returns, it sort of depends on the content. If the content benefits directly from having extremely high quality video, which in some cases for a museum that may be the case, if you're trying to show off a painting or if you're trying to show off a particular process, then quality might matter more. Like how cinematic do you want to go? The setup, even I'm using for this live stream, is about $50,000 worth of equipment, which is overkill. And like, does it look that much better than what I'm guessing is Sam's MacBook Pro camera? There's some difference in quality, but is it $50,000 worth of difference? Probably not. It just kind of depends on what part of the process you're in love with, I think. And at what point do you care about the diminishing returns? If you want something to be very high quality and cinematic and that will be your trademark, then go crazy.
Yeah, it also depends on who's driving the ship. If you're an organization and you're someone from marketing without a background in video production, use what you can. Like, use the tools available to you. There are plenty of free apps and software, and iMovie is just fine for a lot of things, especially when you're in the early experimentation phase. But if you are looking for something that's going to be of a higher production quality, then whatever contractor you bring on to consult with you is going to have a better idea of the equipment that you need. But so there's plenty of tutorials online if you're just looking for like a video 101, and you can do a lot with an iPhone. I mean, iPhones shoot in 4K, so that's high quality video just that in your pocket. So there's a lot that you can do with free or more freely available equipment and software.
Yeah.
If you do want to go the iPhone route, I'd recommend there's an app called Filmic, which can help you use the iPhone more like you would use a cinema camera. Like, you can do a little bit more with color grading options, raw video, you can set frame rate. So even that could be, I think it's like 10, 20 bucks, something like that, is a really good step into learning more about that process without making a giant equipment investment.
So let's move on to our third topic here, making content pay. And certainly we have used a little money icon here, but content pays in different ways. It's not all about necessarily earning money, although sometimes it is, and certainly the far reaches of it are sometimes. But how do you all think about success? How are you measuring whether a video did well? Do you think about it at the video level? Do you think about it at the channel level? What is success? What is important to you? And Emily, in your case, your organization, Sam, to you specifically. Emily, why don't you start? How are you measuring success?
Well, we measure the success of our videos and our channel as a whole sort of against the same metrics that the museum uses to evaluate the success of other digital and marketing initiatives. So in web content development teams, they're always talking about, website visits and clicks and While a lot of the website traffic for a physical institution goes to ticketing and marketing, there is a lot of other material on the website for that the museum is trying to drive traffic to. So it's pretty simple, comparison of who's watching on BrainScoop on YouTube versus who's engaging with the website. And to give a sense of, the kind of numbers we see on our channel, after creating content, like I said, we have over 200 videos over the last 7.5 years. And our channel receives about 300,000 views a month. And so that's a huge amount of engagement, just compared to every other kind of social media and digital initiative that we do as an organization. But it's also really complementary because we still need the website engagement and that kind of thing. So we also evaluate the success of our program based on things like watch time. So how long are people actually, watching the channel? That again is a pretty big number. It's thousands of hours of watch time every month. But in addition to that, the Field Museum has undertaken some audience on-site visitation surveys where they've incorporated questions about BrainScoop and brand awareness. The Field Museum gets about 1.3 million visitors every year, and we know from these surveys what percentage of them extrapolated out from smaller surveys, like how brand aware people are of our program. And so from there, you can kind of translate on-site attendance when we've asked, like, okay, are you aware of this platform and did it have any factor in you visiting today? We're really able to get some numbers behind the admission dollars for people who came to the institution because they watched our show. And again, with our audience being 50% international, we really play the long game, where someone might watch a BrainScoop video 2 years ago and not be able to come to Chicago until now. And again, all of this is in a not COVID world, right? This is new territory in the last couple of months. But we have a pretty strong idea of how many people we drive to the museum physically. And in addition to that, the BrainScoop and our channel is able to get funding and sponsorship opportunities that benefit other parts of our organization. For instance, Field Museum research scientists are always applying for federal grants and federal money, especially National Science Foundation grants. These are multi-million-dollar, multi-year research grants. And by including the BrainScoop videos as part of their deliverables for broader impacts and outreach, basically, we're going to use BrainScoop videos. We're going to do 3 of them over the course of this 3-year grant. And we can provide X, Y, and Z analytics in terms of how we were able to disseminate the knowledge from this grant. So that's another way that we help just drive mission for the organization and incorporate our channel into more of what the rest of the organization is doing. So there's a lot of ways that we measure our success.
And Sam, how about you? You come at it from a different perspective. You are your organization. How do you think about, or how do you measure success of your channels or of specific videos?
Yeah, so I think my answer would be much simpler, just because it's fully self-contained. It's not like we have any goal of sort of driving traffic to a organization. It's really about, like, I mean, the 2 main stakeholders are our audience and our sponsors. So are we making our audience happy with a video? We have tons of analytics on each video that goes up. So we can get a pretty good gauge of that, even beyond just like how many people watched it, because there's confounding variables with that. But things like watch time, and you can just look at the comments and see if your audience is happy. And then it's the sponsor. The monetization model for the videos on YouTube is having a sponsor read at the end. And for almost all of our sponsors, we get performance data. So it's pretty easy to see how many click-throughs or relative performance sponsor to sponsor. And we can sort of look at what other factors might have impacted good or bad performance.
Got it. So we mentioned Nebula at the beginning of the webinar here. Nebula, Dave, perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about it, but from what I understand, it is a subscription-based streaming platform. But so how do we think about something like YouTube, where you put it up, you can have your own channel, perhaps you can have ads, or trying to, have something a little more exclusive, something people pay for. Dave or Sam, because Sam, I know you're on both, but how do you think about that? What is the best way for organizations to think about that trade-off? Dave, you are on mute, my friend.
Damn it, I thought I had that. I don't think of Nebula as a competitor to YouTube, and I don't think that it's an either or situation. In our case, we treat Nebula as an expansion pack to YouTube. There is the content, and the question is, where does the content live? Somebody had asked in the Q&A about Vimeo versus YouTube, and the real answer there is that Vimeo is just not a good discovery platform. YouTube, for all of its flaws, is really good as a discovery platform. Something like Nebula, we didn't build it to be a discovery platform, but because of the way the audience interacts with content, it still acts that way for them just because of the featured page that we have at the front. And for the content creator, the content that they make, there's a couple of questions we have to ask. Where does the content live? Who owns the content? I don't mean like in terms of intellectual property rights. Of course, the creator owns it, but who owns the relationship? And with YouTube, the problem is that YouTube owns that relationship. And I liken it to, you open a store in a mall, and the mall has absolute control over every aspect of your business. You can sell whatever kinds of things you want, and you can try to attract whatever customers you want, but ultimately the mall gets to decide which stores you're next to, how the foot traffic arrives there. And at any point, you might come in to your previously successful, thriving business one morning to open up and find that your your store has been moved to the other end of the mall where the Sears used to be, a giant empty husk of a department store, and you have no foot traffic and no explanation for why. You might also find that one day you come in, and because you played the wrong song over the speakers the day before, the mall is now giving half of your money to a record label, and there's nothing you can do about it. So not being able to own the audience relationship and not really owning your own store is problematic long-term. So the first thing that we try to address with something like Nebula is creating a situation where even though a lot of the videos, like the videos that go on YouTube also go on Nebula. So it's sort of re-domiciling the content where the creator owns the platform, owns the relationship that they have with the audience, can own the discovery mechanisms. The second piece of it, monetization, most of the money for our creators at least still comes from YouTube. A small percentage of that is from AdSense. The lion's share is from sponsor relationships. So Nebula or private platforms, it's not about replacing YouTube for money. It's about generating a new revenue stream. And with us, one of the relationships that we had on the sponsor side is a streaming video service. So we partnered up with them, and we can now, through a fluke and a series of coincidences that are happy synergies, I guess, we are now able to pay our creators to promote their own streaming service, because the streaming service that we partnered with is paying us to do that. There's a weird situation to be in. So it does have a direct monetary impact, but the bulk of the money is coming from the sponsor relationship to get in there, not from Nebula itself. Although Nebula does, we pay out 50% of the service's profits to the creators. For the creator, it's more about having a new home for their content that is something that they own, and about having a sort of a sandbox where they can try new things, make new videos, get more experimental without having to worry about what the algorithm is going to do. When our creators make a Nebula original, they're funded projects, and the creator can do whatever they want. Because at the end of the day, it's not an algorithm deciding who is going to watch or who's not going to watch a video. It is the audience being, the creator gets to tell the audience, I have this thing. I put it up on Nebula, it's my video, go check it out if you want to, it's $3 a month. And if the audience does, then we know it worked. If the audience doesn't, we know it didn't work. And it's not because the video was good or bad, or it wasn't presented in the right way by the platform. We know that it is because the audience either wanted to see it or they didn't want to see it, which ultimately is the more useful metric of whether or not your audience cares what you're doing. So
Emily,
the two platforms, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask Emily, certainly I know that the Brain Scoop is, of course, a YouTube channel. It's also linked off of the Field Museum's website, but any consideration for putting that content on a subscription service, or is that something you've ever thought about or something you've ever done?
Certainly. I mean, we have not capitalized on all of the potential for this program. And the reason being that, like I said earlier, it's just myself and one other person. We're not, we don't have a program manager. We don't have a fundraising officer assigned to our show. We don't have anybody doing distribution research for us. It's really opportunistic. So certainly, as soon as I learned about Nebula and Dave and Sam's work, I piqued my interest because it's one other opportunity that I could at least share with the executives above me as an opportunity for them to potentially explore someday should they feel the need to expand our distribution of our channel. But making those decisions is something that's kind of out of my control.
Got it. So we're rounding up on time here, and I want to get to one last question that I'll have you each answer, which is, and this can be in any form, although keeping in mind, again, that we are talking to arts organizations who are very strapped for time, people, and money right now. No pressure. But when you think about one piece of advice that you have for arts organizations that want to do more with video, what is that piece of advice? Dave, I'll start with you, then we'll go Sam, and we'll round out with Emily.
One piece of advice. Wow. There's so many to choose from. I think start making things, keep making things. The thing that kills channels is not the videos are bad. The things that will kill a channel is there are no videos. And I am guilty of this. I make like one video a year, but I have some other stuff going on, and that's my excuse. But if you're trying to build a brand on YouTube, as a museum, as an educator, as a vlogger, like the key to it is keep making stuff. The single most effective metric we've seen for being able to tell if a channel is going to succeed or not is looking at well, there's two of them. One is the percentage of the views that come from subscribers, and how much of your video traffic comes from you. And when someone is like really blowing up, most of their video traffic comes from their other videos. So somebody will discover one of your videos, love it, and want to go watch a bunch more, which, as we talked about earlier, the algorithm will reward you for. But it comes down to giving the audience a collection of things that they would enjoy and care about. And you can't do that unless you just keep making stuff.
Got it. Sam, how about you? One piece of advice to arts organizations who want to do more in video.
Yeah, I mean, my one piece of advice is actually kind of related to Dave's. It's a thing that you can't really dip your toes into very easily. I think you kind of have to dive in the deep end, and because you're not going to generate a new audience from making one video. You're going to generate a new audience from making 25. And you're not going to get a big, instant gauge on whether this is successful or not from one video. You're going to get it from doing this over a period of time. And it also is about, you have to put a certain amount of commitment into making new content. You're probably not going to generate a new audience from just repurposing existing content. I think it requires at least a level of novelty to it. And to an extent, the video content should be something that people can't find elsewhere, but would potentially drive them to the core competencies of an organization. So like in the example of Brain Scoop, you're not just doing 360 virtual tours of galleries or something. You're making new content that is expanding upon the sort of main content of the Field Museum. And I think that's one thing to think about. It's about expanding upon, it's about going deeper than into your core content.
Got it. And we are almost up on time. So Emily, I will give you the final word. One piece of advice.
And I agree with what Dave and Sam have just shared. And I would add on that to say, you know, this is supposed to be fun, guys. This is supposed to be exciting and enjoyable and a new frontier for your organization. So find people who feel passionately about this. I wouldn't have stayed on YouTube, which can be a volatile platform, if I wasn't really deeply invested in the people who are watching our program. And so I treat BrainScoop sort of as an extension and a microcosm of so many other things that we do as an organization, from membership cultivation and donor interaction to, and I apologize, I have a cat on my desk now, to, you know, just outreach and customer service, you know, so many other things that we do as an organization, and kind of funneling it all to this other platform and channel. And I do it because I truly care about our development and investment of our digital audiences for the betterment of our organization. So I think enjoy the process is my biggest piece of advice, because if you're not enjoying it, then you're not going to be able to commit to creating a lot of content, or you won't find content creation to be sustainable otherwise.
Got it. Well, a huge thank you to our panelists, a huge thank you to our attendees. Please do answer our feedback poll if you have a chance. Should be up on your screen now. And please do let us know at Advisory Board for the Arts. We're always here to help you. So please do reach out if there's any way we can help you or your teams. Hope everyone stays safe and stays well. Look forward to seeing you on YouTube, and have a great day, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.